so the title of this class, I mean, that is Social 119 is race, ethnicity, and culture, and race presumably is our biological refers to or references or frames our biological characteristics, right? Our bodies. Ethnicity really kind of frames, it's a multifaceted term that references it's a blending of kind of culture and nationality at a large group level, but it means many, many things. And then in culture and sociology, so anyway, ethnicity and then culture is culture. Culture is like anything, the kinds of things that hang on, I got to set this down. The factors and forces that really unite groups in some way, right? Whatever it is, it can be language, customs, mores, the way they dress, the way they conceptualize God, however it is, right? So culture is lots of things. We talked about culture last week when we talked about trans culture, right? This is culture, this is a subculture. There are lots of subcultures, right? Okay, so we're thinking about biology, we're thinking about sociology, which is, again, all the factors and forces that go into the social groupings or what make us social groups. And then we're talking about nationality. And also, because, we link, when we identify groups, in particular groups, we think about race, ethnicity, and culture, we are talking about it. Sometimes we're talking about countries. But within those countries are lots and lots of different groupings of people. And so this stuff is really, really just incredibly complex. And so, because there's nothing, because it's just hard to say anything about anybody, and then once you have some sort of generalization, like we decide how we're going to sort of break you all up into separate groups. Once we do that, then we have to try to say something meaningful about each individual. Like you got to fit into that group, and you almost never do. And so then it's like, why am I even teaching this effing class, right? Like, what's the point? Since I can't say anything about anything, it just becomes really difficult. And so it's why as I age, as the years go on, I find it more and more difficult to talk about this stuff, because I really feel like there's almost like I have to make thoughtful generalizations, meaning that I have to try to say thoughtful things about groups of people, but I can't, and I know that I can't. And so like imagine being me and having to say something about, I don't know, whatever it is. Like it's just like, it's virtually impossible. And yet here we are, stuck together in this world.
Cool. Hi, I'm Simone. I'm a general science major, and I'm a junior.
General science major and a junior. And are you, by chance, from New York?
I happen to be from New York.
Oh, man. I'll tell you what. Fuck, I didn't waste my money on my PhD. I'll tell you, man. So let me just ask you this. It's going to sound like you're really on the spot. First off, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And no matter what you say, there's going to be whoever's watching on the stream and whoever is sitting in class and whoever's going to watch the video is going to say they're going to disagree with it. Okay? So we're going to start right there. Not disagree. They're just going to say like, what? Why'd you answer that way? It's one of those questions, right? So we're starting in that space. So listen, so how would you respond? It's like, let's say you're on the other side of the world. Have you traveled much? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, you in New York, you travel,
I'm from Long Island. We don't go many places.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, it's Long Island. If you're on the other side of the world and someone says, tell us some things about American culture and the American people. Where would you start? Like, what would you say? Tell us about Americans.
We're very opinionated, I would say.
Okay.
What else?
So think about in the world of race. We are opinionated. Well, I don't know, though. Everyone's opinion. I don't know, whatever. Okay, think about race, ethnicity, and culture. Think about those levels. Like, say some things about Americans.
I would say we tend to centralize all of our attention on white Christians. I feel like most of us here are. I feel like everywhere else in the world is a lot more diversity. I know there is diversity here, but in the past we've tended to shut that down a lot, which is a bad look for us, which makes sense. But I feel like we're all kind of generally the same.
So we tend to focus on
what the majority is.
Okay, white people, Christianity as kind of dominant the dominant group becomes, like you mean, so like, when you think about America, America is white people.
That's what I would say.
When you think about the U.S. is Christians. Uh-huh. All right, what else? What could you say that you would say? You know,
about Americans?
Yeah, you and I are sitting in a coffee shop in Istanbul, right, or Ankara in Turkey. And I'm just like, hey, you're American. Tell me about Americans.
We love our guns. We love our rights.
Yeah. Wait, so hang on. I want to go back to something you said earlier, though. Mm-hmm. We love our guns. We love our rights. I want to go back to ethnic groups. You said we tend to we're all pretty much the same, you said. What do you mean by that? Coming from a New Yorker, that says something.
Yeah. So, well, even traveling to Pennsylvania, it's like a whole different thing. I see less diversity in Pennsylvania, obviously, than New York. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of the news, it's always like the problems that like white people care about. It's always something to do with other races, blaming other races. We never blame ourselves.
So it seems like that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. By the way, awesome. I mean, these are great. These are answers. It's not. It's something now we're going to play off of. So when you think about the U.S., when you think about the U.S. and you think about diversity, like what comes to mind? Like, so if I say, let's say I ask you, hey, Americans are wealthy, right? We're in that coffee shop in Turkey. Americans are really wealthy, right?
I mean, I'd say a lot of people are, but there is a handful who aren't, and I feel like they aren't represented as much. We mostly talk about the wealthy people in America. They're like headlines, they get everything, unless it's talking about, I guess, issues we're having, and then we bring up like homelessness, etc.
All right, so listen. So, Simone, think about, your answers are fine. Like, they're great. This is like kind of answers that I would expect. They're fine, right? So, but now what I want to do is, how easy was that to even come up with anything?
Pretty easy.
Pretty easy?
Yeah.
But you see how you just skim the surface? Like, we had this conversation in a coffee shop, let's say, and you didn't even touch, you just were right around the surface, right? So can you go to so listen, so here's like the ethno-racial background right now. 60% white, 18.5% Hispanic, 12.2% Black, 5.6% Asian, multiracial, and Native American, okay? This is like, 4 out of every 10 people in the United States are not white. And so like what you said about so other people who are thinking the United States is a white nation, how would you respond? You see, like, you'd have to stop and say, like, yo, hang on a second, right? So go to the next one. So this is what it's going to be in 20 years. 50% white people, right? Basically a quarter of the population Hispanic, about 13% Black. Asian population is growing, multiracial, Native American, like half of all. So you understand, like, the importance of what you just said, or what you said about, like, really understanding the U.S. It's like, wait a minute. This is like, we're not even, if you're only talking about white people or thinking about white issues in the U.S., right now you're missing 40% of the population of the United States. And that's just putting all white people together in a single group. Because being from New York, you know that's not the case, right? So Long Island, right? Like the Jewish population on Long Island, the Italian population. What's your background, by the way?
I'm Italian.
Italian? Okay, so even there, it's like complete different worlds. And so, but imagine in 20 years when half the population in the U.S. is white, and you're sitting in only half, and you're sitting in a coffee shop, and you're trying to make generalizations about the United States. And if you don't know about all these different groups and all the levels of subcultures that are happening in the groups, you're like, you get nowhere. It's just like it's an empty conversation. Here, let me show you. Can you go one more on the issue of wealth? So if you took all the money in the U.S., all the money, right, and you just laid it out across the land of the U.S., you just piled it up, okay? And you had an equal amounts piled up all across the U.S., this whole landmass. The richest 1% would own that much of the land. The next 9%, this much. So the richest 10% own this much. And then you get another 30% own this much, right? 20% would own this bottom part of Texas, and 40% of Americans own that little dot right there. So when we talk about, when I ask you the question, Americans are wealthy, right? It's like, what would you say now to that question?
Not so much. I mean, yeah, the top 10% would own a majority of it, but that's only 10%. The 90 is going to own everything else, but that's like such a small geographic area for us to have.
Okay, so now you're sitting in that coffee shop and 9 other Americans show up. And they're like, hey, no, we want to participate in this conversation with you. We want to talk about Americans. And like, and you think about this. What are you going to think?
I mean, there aren't as many rich, but those who are going to own majority of what we have.
Okay, and you're going to want to know, like, the other 9 people. So you 10 people are going to represent the United States, and you're going to tell people what the United States is, right? Mm-hmm. But like, where you are in this is going to say a huge amount about what you say and what you think about. And so, like, I remember I had a conversation with someone who had they met somebody from Cuba, right? And their plumber was working at their house, and their plumber was from Cuba, and their plumber told them all sorts of information about Cuba. And this guy just believed it all. He's like, oh, yeah, well, this is because I met a guy from Cuba, and he told me how it was. And I'm like, dude, that's not how it is. Have you ever been to Cuba? No, I've never been to Cuba, dude. But I know that you don't listen to that guy. He doesn't have the answer to what Cuba is like. But he used to live there. I don't give a damn that he used to live there. Dude, anybody can live in the United States. And if you live up here and somewhere in this world, how much do you know about people living in that little bubble right there? How much do you know?
Nothing.
There's virtually nothing. And if you live here, how much do you know about people living up there?
Technically, I would say nothing, but if they're controlling a majority of it, I feel like they know something.
No, but if you're really poor, you don't know much about these folks.
Nothing.
Right? And so now you imagine that you're making generalizations about the world about Americans based on people in this group alone, or people in this group, or this group, or this group right there. Your generalizations are going to be really wacky, right? They're going to be off because it's like, how are you going to get that? And that's the struggle we're in, and that's what what I want to do today is I want to break down those generalizations as we just started to do, right? Wait, hang on, just go to this really fast. I wanted to say this. We have 33 million people in the United States, and 42 million of them of us in the U.S. speak Spanish, and 66 million people living in the U.S. speak a language other than English in the home. And if you and I are sitting at that coffee shop, and you're like, well, we speak English, and you're like, wait, hang on a second. 66 million people living in this country don't speak English in their home. So what does that mean, right? It means if you're not accounting for all these things, you're just missing it.